you can call Christianity false and wicked and evil, or you can call it true, but to call it boring, that word then doesn't mean anything anymore. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's not boring. It can't be boring.
Welcome to This Strange Land with Jason Jensen. Join the conversation with other courageous ministry leaders as we explore what it means to serve the church in a rapidly changing and unfamiliar world. Discover insight, wisdom, and inspiration as you live out your ministry calling in this strange land.
Thank you for joining me. I'm here with Monsignor Shea. He's the president of the University of Mary in North Dakota, and he's also the steward of the collective that is the Prime Matters publisher of From Christendom to Apostolic Mission. And you guys have recently published a new book called
Religion of the Day.
Religion of the Day.
That's right.
And I'm hoping to get into some of that in our conversation today. You're also one of the gifted orators of our time, and in your ability to roll out the kerygma for people in a way that seems to be really resonating with them. So I'm really grateful that you would join me today. Thank you for being here.
And Jason, it's wonderful to be here with you today at the National Eucharistic Congress. It's an amazing gathering of faith, and of course it's wonderful to have those fond memories of our time together in Vancouver. Remember, key leaders from the University of Mary came up for a sprint with glass canvas, and you served us in a magnificent way. That was a very generative time. And you yourself, Jason, facilitated much of the discussion.
Thank you.
And so I think you're doing amazing work for the church, and I'm a big fan of Tilma.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Here today, I'm hoping to have a conversation. This is episode 1 of a podcast that we're actually calling This Strange Land. I haven't told you that, but it's from Psalm 137, where the people of God find themselves lamenting in Babylon. And verse 4 says, "How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?" And why I call the podcast The Strange Land is because in some ways we find ourselves underneath an imagination like the people of Israel did when they were in Babylon, that is not a Christocentric or, in their sense, a God-inspired imaginative vision. And we'll get into imaginative vision in a second. But we also find the land that we live in kind of strange. In some ways, it's the same as the people of Israel, and in some ways, it's just very strange and very different from those. And so, inspired by Daniel's and the Esthers and the Shadrach, Meshach, Abednegos, we want to be able to tell some people, leaders and pastors and people who are trying to navigate the times that we find ourselves in a better way. And I couldn't be happier that you're the first guest on our podcast. You're perfect. And I want to start with a question of, we had From Christendom to Apostolic Mission, and we had a conversation about that a couple of years ago. Why did the need for religion of the day, to unpack that, why was that the natural or the intuitive next step that you and the collective, that is the group, decide to do?
Well, let me riff for just a moment on the title of your podcast and why I think it's such a good idea to name and begin to describe this sense of displacement that we as disciples of Jesus feel in a culture which used to be firmly rooted in Christian principles and informed by the sweeping narrative of the gospel of Jesus Christ, even if subconsciously, and to begin to articulate and grapple with that grief is really important. And, I'll reveal a small secret here, and that's that I flew into Cincinnati instead of Indianapolis for this gathering at the Eucharistic Congress, and I did that for a couple of reasons. First, I didn't want to grapple with all of the traffic in and out of Indy. I know that this airport's going to be slammed the day of my arrival and then tomorrow when we all go home. And Cincinnati is only 100 miles away. And for somebody from North Dakota or from the far reaches of Western Canada, that's like nothing, right? But also, I wanted to go and pray at the tomb in Hollinsburg, Ohio. You know, the Cincinnati airport's actually not in Ohio, it's in Kentucky. And it's kind of at the convergence of Kentucky and Indiana and Ohio. And in Hollinsburg, Ohio, is the tomb of Rich Mullins, who was a Christian songwriter and I think one of the great poets of the 20th century, in my humble opinion. He had a deep, deep impact and influence on me. And he died in a Jeep crash on an Illinois highway on September 19th of 1997. He was on his way to Wichita to be received into the Catholic Church. Archbishop Coakley of Oklahoma City, who at that time was a priest of Wichita, was going to hear his confession. And then Father Matt McGinnis, who's a priest of Wichita, was going to receive him into the church. So anyway, he had just a deep influence on me, and I went to pray at his grave and then zipped over here to Indianapolis. I was very moved by that possibility. But he has a song called Land of My Sojourn, where he describes precisely what you were trying to articulate before. And there's a line from that song: nobody tells you when you get born here how much you'll come to love it and how you'll never belong here. And so it's just very beautiful, this impulse that you have to begin to describe what all of us are experiencing. We tried to describe it a little bit in the essay From Christendom to Apostolic Mission. And again, I've told this story before, but I came up to Vancouver to see you. I had just come off a 30-day silent retreat in Jerusalem, and I had the manuscript in my back pocket. And it had gathered dust for 3 or 4 years. You know, a group of friends and I had gone around and around and around on this thing. And I just didn't have time to publish it. And when we were in Vancouver, I didn't know that we were kind of on the eve or soon approaching this worldwide catastrophic pandemic, and that things would shut down, and that I would, for the first time in many years, have a little bit of time. And so that's when finally the manuscript got prepared for publication. We released it in May of 2020. I think I was to see you in August of 2019. And I had hinted you. I said to you and J.M. Boyd and others, I said, who were involved in this process, I said, you know, we're not so lacking in vision. We do have a sense for what we're going to do. But we publish it as an internal vision piece. Maybe we printed 350 copies or something, and it's sold in the hundreds of thousands. And we've never advertised it at all, except on your podcast. But anyway, we were trying to describe this moment that we find ourselves in, this post-Christendom age, a new apostolic age. And if you'll remember, at the very end, we say that the key task of the new apostolic age is to regain a Christian mind, to reappropriate and to begin to live once again from the Christian imaginative vision. And what that entails, inevitably, is not simply identifying the sweeping, epic, gripping narrative of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and once again allowing ourselves to be immersed in it and to breathe from it, and to allow it to captivate us and sweep us off our feet once again. But it also involves identifying what the principles of the new religion, the new ruling imaginative vision, which has taken hold in society, which is dependent upon and parasitic in many ways of Christianity, what that is. At the end of the Christendom book, we say that it's the modern progressive vision. And so that's the beginning of it. It's a natural development to talk about the religion of the day in the second essay, because that's where we ended with the first essay. The religion of the day is just a more fulsome description of this new religion. And, you know, when I have a younger brother who's a priest, you can cut me off at any time if you're tired of this long answer.
No, it's very good.
But I have a younger brother who's a priest, and he was chaplain at the University of Mary for 4 years. while I was president, so we were like working together, and that was fun. At least for me, I don't know what
Continue
it was like
bossing him around,
Yeah,
just
right,
like
right, yeah, that's
childhood.
good.
He's probably used to it, whatever it was. So,
And we used to play a game called "If I Were the Devil," meaning if something weird was going on, like this is a little vibey, or smells like sulfur, we'd say, if I were the devil, what would I be up to here? What would the play be? And try and describe what we were up to. And of course, the Catholic faith is devastating to the enemy. Christianity was a very shocking, and the death of Jesus, complete defeat on Calvary, the resurrection. And then to add insult to injury, the evangelization of the world. This was just like bad times for Satan, not a good deal for him. So if I were the devil, we said, and considering the Christian imaginative vision, if I were the devil, what would I do about this? And I think religion of the day is an attempt to describe what he decided to do. And it's this. Well, what if there could be a religion that nobody thinks is a religion? That would be super interesting. You know what I mean? So that everybody in Canada, for instance, would think that they're not religious anymore,
right.
And all the Americans would be kind of right behind them. That would be an interesting move. And what if it could take the good news, this new religion could take the good news and make it seem like terrible news? That would be a masterstroke, I think. And what if this new religion could be parasitic of Christianity, meaning it would steal all of its mythic, sweeping force and its imaginative clarity, and as a result, make Christianity seem like super boring, while the new religion seems exhilarating? What if the spikes of the virus could be fashioned in such a way that it takes deepest hold in the areas that were once most profoundly influenced by the Christian imaginative vision? You know what I mean? Like, what if you could take down Belgium, Spain, Quebec, and Ireland? Like, wow, that would be a masterstroke. And what if you could fashion it so that it would result in the most fragile and unconfident people in the history of the world, who are at the same time the most prideful people who have ever lived? It would be incredible. And if you could do it all, like growing it out of a movement, over the course of about 300 years, you need some time for something like this. If you could do it over the course of about 300 years, and you could like snatch away the first chapter of John's gospel, the true light that was enlightening every man was coming into the world, and like, let's call it the Enlightenment. That would be amazing.
Right.
And so this is an attempt to describe that new religion, which we gave a very simple name: modern neo-Gnostic, progressive, revolutionary religion.
Neo-Gnosticism for short.
Yeah, right.
It's fascinating. I read the book, and on the plane ride actually here, we sat in front of a lovely family that they had just come from a cruise for Alaska, and they were flying from Vancouver to our layover spot. And I handed Sean, he said, in preparing for this interview, I handed Sean, one of the guys with me on the trip, I handed him the book. And one of the party, and there was probably, 15 of them, says, "Oh, what's that?"
Wow.
And I was like, okay. I said, "Hey, do you have any, faith background?" And the grandparents in this, 3-generational cohort were Catholic. But the daughter, so 3 generations, grandparents, parents, and then younger kids who sat further away from us, but or teenage kids. The daughter was like, "What is that?" And she is a professed nothing. which is a fascinating example of what you're saying. Is she doesn't associate with even having a religion. And so the conversation unfolded. I asked, hey, do you have any faith background? That would help. And I said, look, we all have a worldview. Yes, I agreed, because I didn't think saying we had a religion was going to stick, because I'm intuiting what you're saying in this conversation. But we ended up having probably a 4-hour conversation on the plane. She's had a near-death experience where she's died. She's experienced a wonderful love that she expressed as light. And she just kept this is her personal experience. I'm not, baptizing this as, truth, but I received her well in her, sharing her story. And you can just see that as the conversation unfolded, I was saying, that's the gospel here. That's the gospel here. This is a twist of the gospel. She's like, oh, I just believe that we're all connected. And I said, Jesus says, I'm the vine, we are the branches. And you can see that the devil has done something really powerful in that conversation, in that the truth that is Christian framework that she's heavily borrowing from, she has twisted. And now I'm trying to convince her that her experience is deeply Catholic. But it's a delicate balance of being able to say, and the tension point in that conversation was always, well, no, this is my experience. Catholicism is, I was baptized as a kid and all that kind of stuff. But which I did end up telling her, I said, maybe the grace of your baptism was still available to you throughout your life. And so I left her with a few talking points. But one interesting thing is, as I handed the book over, right in the beginning of our conversation, her husband said, I explained the religion of the day, and the grandmother said, well, what's the solution? And the husband said, get rid of all religion. And he put his earphones in and wasn't available to us the rest of the plane ride. So I share that because it's such a tangible example of how this happens in the real world. And as I was reading your book, sometimes we can think of, political ideologies are so easy to find, but I think it's so much closer to us interpersonally than we might ever imagine.
Yeah. Well, so let me say first that, and I'm glad that this is being taped, because if your cause comes up for canonization, I'm going to put forward a 4-hour conversation on an airplane post-COVID.
Okay.
I've never heard of that before. Nobody talks to each other on airplanes anymore. So I think that's a miracle. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, isn't it extraordinary that this woman would have this profound experience? Like, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And you heard of other people. I haven't had an experience of that kind, but I've met people who have, and that's the kind of thing in the phenomenon of human life that would typically lead to a kind of burning curiosity, a quest to find the answers, which would not die away or become complacent ever until the answer was found, because of that profound experience. But the contemporary world is anesthetic even of wonder to that extent. I think there are many threads that could be brought together, but I think that one of the most important things, Jason, is this, and you can tell me if this rings true, because I might not, I wasn't in the conversation. You did a great job describing it, but the urgency is gone. So through most of human history, when the gospel has been preached, it's been received as overwhelmingly good news, because people knew that there was a problem. They just didn't know what to do about it. They were trying various sacrifices and rituals of expiation and all, but it was clear that there was a profound sense of alienation within human life that needed to be addressed, and needed to be addressed urgently. That there was a sickness in us. This modern neo-Gnostic faith, which has suffused the culture, is unique in history in lulling people into a complacent, everybody's napping. nap time.
Almost a satanic lullaby has been sung over us.
So in that, it's you're okay, I'm okay, the whole world's okay. Look, there's nothing wrong with you. Just have your values. I'll have my values. Or your opinions. I'll have my opinions. And
all religions are the same.
That's
it's
right.
It's a part of the conversation.
That's right. You do your thing. I'll do my thing. And so, but what's missing from that, of course, is that no, wait. There's something seriously wrong here. Like if what we're just describing is okay, you don't get Ukraine. That's not happening right now. Yeah. You don't have Gaza. What do you like? Seriously? You're okay. I'm okay. Do your thing. I'll do my thing. And when we meet, it will be beautiful. Yeah. That's not happening in Gaza and Israel, right? I mean, right?
Yeah. It seems so. This new religion feels so incohesive. You know? And that's what continued to be more and more evident as the conversation was happening. I don't believe in sin. It's something, that comes in this conversation and many. And it said, well, I really hurt people around me all the time. I don't know what to call it if not to call it sin. And I think that's extrapolating, I'm okay, you're okay, doesn't happen because that's another play of the devil. It's that the continuation of our thought doesn't actually extrapolate to beyond that. So,
well, it's the making of the good news into bad news. Yeah. So if a physician shows up in a land with an antidote to a deadly, deadly disease, but all the people there are in denial that they're sick, his arrival won't be heralded as a profound relief and as shockingly, earth-shatteringly good news as salvation. It'll be seen as an annoyance. This guy should get the hell out of here. And that's what's going on.
And almost even worse is that, we tried that medicine before and it didn't help.
That's right.
It didn't heal us, which is a more compounding problem in the interpersonal conversations that I've been having with people.
That's super interesting. That's a good observation.
And so in some ways, she grew up Catholic and was inoculated to that being the good news. And I think, there's in the book, one of the things that struck me the most of this incoherent worldview was, and I had to reflect on this for weeks after, because I feel like it hit me so hard in my own heart, having naturally we're in a culture and we're all fall sick to parts of it too. None of us is immune to the disease of the day because we are deeply we're in the culture that we live in a deep way. But one of the things that struck me most powerfully was I can't remember the exact way it was phrased in the book, but the idea of substitutional atonement. And in a religion that doesn't have that, where we don't look to Jesus as having paid the price, we automatically interiorly understand that somebody has to pay or love or resolve the lack or the disconnect, or really it's, we know it's the results of the fall and sin. But seeing that come through and be much ignored in a conversation like that was fascinating for me. And for me to see it in the rest of my life too, is that when I haven't fully resolved in my heart that Jesus died for me, for my sins, for my salvation, and for my sanctification, I start to look for who else needs to suffer in order for me to do that as a mark of the religion of the day.
Yeah, that's good, Jason, because I think what you're describing oftentimes is expressed often as a psychological maxim, hurt people, or this kind of thing. But to put your finger on a theological basis for it and then extrapolate that to the culture is quite astute, I think, because it is the case that in this neo-Gnostic progressive vision, there needs to be a villain. That's why this dualistic view of history which arises out, in which there's the past, in which almost everything is bad, and the future in which almost everything is good. The whole constant refrain about being on the right side of history, that divides all of humanity into the enlightened and the intransigent, those who are holding back the progress of humanity. And so you do see that our public life becomes an exercise in identifying the villains. Of course, this is exactly what the enemy wants, for us to turn upon each other and fail to recognize that we really don't have a single human enemy. Have you heard of the Avid brothers? Do you know these people?
I don't.
Okay, there are a couple brothers who have a band. I like them a lot. I think their grandpa was a Methodist minister or preacher in North Carolina, maybe. But they have a song called No Hard Feelings, and it ends, I have no enemies. I have no enemies. It's very profound and beautiful. I feel like I'm here peddling all of my favorite artists today.
That's wonderful. We're getting some a few pieces that don't come out on the bigger stages.
That's
so
right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Should we talk about Dolly Parton next?
Is she another one of your favorites?
I'm not.
I want to kind of come back to this Christian or Catholic imaginative vision. Like we talked about that. You mentioned it a couple times earlier as in our conversation. But what is that?
Yeah, so every society, every culture has a ruling imaginative vision. And this oftentimes it's secured by religion, but it's not simply religion. It's ideas of what it means to be a good person, categories of success and failure. It's what life should look like, rules for behavior. It usually anchors, structures the institutional life of the culture. Education is based upon it. The way that the culture forms citizens. And so it's this governing, ruling, imaginative vision, which makes up kind of almost and often a subconscious infrastructure or foundation along which life proceeds. And most people assume the ruling imaginative vision, and by imaginative here I don't mean imaginary, right? Bibbidi bobbidi boo and fairy tales and all that. Imagination refers to the human faculty to hold within us that which is past and that which is present, and to begin to extrapolate about the future and all of those things. It's an amazing human capacity. And so that's the ruling imaginative vision. When the ruling imaginative vision of a culture is informed deeply by the gospel, and you have a Christian ruling imaginative vision. And so I think the main point of the Christendom book is that we used to have that. We don't have it anymore. That there's a new imaginative vision which has replaced Christianity as the fundamental guide of the society. And that's what the religion of the day is an attempt to describe.
Yeah, and if for anyone listening, if as you're imagining this, just go talk to somebody and say, how should our culture, what should society do?
Yeah, that's
where
right.
should we go?
Yeah.
And you'll quickly encounter sort of the framework in which they're saying, we need to go to Mars because we need to be interplanetary, or and not that that's bad, but it's not necessarily built on a Catholic imaginative vision. That's a Christocentric one of the progress of what the human person should be. So
yeah, and I mean, this is reflected here in this country. We're in the midst of an election year.
Yeah.
Do you know that up north that
we're well aware
that we have things happening here? It's been one of the most eventful weeks in American political history ever, the week in which we are right now. There's a lot of crazy stuff spinning around, plates and all that. We're here by the tens of thousands worshiping Jesus in the Eucharist because we want to make it out of here alive. But there you go. But, when you ask people polling questions, is America going in the right direction? Is the world going in the right direction? The answer to those questions is it emerges from the ruling imaginative vision that the respondent has adopted, and so the sense of whether things are going in a good direction or a bad direction entirely depends upon philosophical presuppositions, which are mostly subconsciously assumed. There are always the few who have thought things through and who have really clarified them, but that's always quite a minority, I think.
Yeah. I want to shift a little bit and hopefully tie it together with what we're talking about. And I've noticed when you give talks and when you preach, I believe you're employing mythic narrative. And there's a podcast that you guys have on Prime Matters called Mythic Narrative, and it's a beautiful articulation of salvation history, but from a mythic narrative lens or style.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what is mythic narrative, and why do you implore it, and why is it so powerful, and why do you think it resonates with people, especially those who are familiar with this neo-Gnosticism and have it, rooted in themselves to lesser or greater degrees?
Yeah, well, there are many ways to answer the question. I think if I cut right to the chase, human beings are inveterate meaning-seeking creatures, and we seek meaning by having a story. And so I ask you who you are, and you'll tell me something about your story. And if you want to rob a person or deprive them entirely of hope, you take away their sense of what their life is all about. You disrupt or denigrate their narrative. And I think if I could pull just a little bit of evidence out of my back pocket, I just want us to consider for a moment the sweeping popularity of Game of Thrones and the Harry Potter series and Marvel Comics and Star Wars after all these years, and or even the Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia. It's no surprise that hundreds of millions of dollars have been made upon production of this kind, because it taps deep into the psyche of the human person, this struggle between good and evil, this call to heroism and high adventure, this epic saga. Whew, I mean, it's wonderful. Now, here's the thing, and now I'm agitated, and I'm going to throw over the microphone and dump over our secret drink that you've given me, and that's this, that we have the most extraordinary story as Christians that's ever been seriously believed. It's beyond imagination. It's so unbelievably beautiful. Our story has the best heroes and the worst villains. It has the highest stakes. It has the most achingly beautiful, self-sacrificing love. The romance of it is unmatched. We've got the best story, but everybody thinks it's a snoozer. This is very discouraging. Dorothy Sayers. Dorothy Sayers was a English convert to Christianity. Maybe was she one of the translators of the Divine Comedy? I think she did that, and she's done. I mean, she was a great literary person. And she said that the dogma is the drama. People think dogma is just like boring and all this, and that Jesus is, we've had enough of that guy. But she says, you can call Christianity false and wicked and evil, or you can call it true, but to call it boring, that word then doesn't mean anything anymore. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's not boring. It can't be boring. And so the Christian mythic narrative, that project, which is an audio project on Prime Matters, is an attempt to retell the story of the kerygma in this epic, sweeping way. Father John Riccardo is overdoing it with the Rescue Project in Acts 29, and he does a great job. And of course, Father Mike Schmitz, who is just so fun, has his Bible in a Year podcast. And I see just before we came down here, they finally got with the act, Ascension Presents. They finally got with the act, and they did a 10-minute version of Bible in a Year as kind of a teaser. And I was like, good. You know what I mean? In other words, people need to have it presented to them. And then if you crack open the door, they can't wait to get inside. We've got to return to that. If we don't, we're in trouble because it's all we've got. All we've got is the greatest story ever told. But that's something. And we can make do with that.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing that kind of comes back to from Christendom is there's an identity that comes with a story.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
and
right. Did you find your place in it? That's good. Yeah.
And we don't understand ourselves if we don't understand our story. Now, there's other things that we need to understand in order to have an identity. But if you don't know from whence you came or where you're going, I think that's fascinating. And the reason Harry Potter and all these other mythic narratives have caught on is that they place us within the epic. You know, they place us within that. They give us, the enchanted self, as Taylor would say.
I think that they kind of do that. I think that's right. Sometimes they displace us from it, though, at the same time, and make us live in a kind of vicarious, envious third person, second person.
The longing for that is deeply exposed in that, which is why we're drawn to it.
Yeah.
That would be...
No, that's right. But why don't we break it? I'm interested in hearing this because you're sophisticated and insightful and savvy about these things. What about the way that social media functions as a kind of private or personal marketing? Isn't it true in kind of a small way that when you put together a profile on social media that you're engaging in myth making, that you're presenting a particular vision of yourself or whatever? So Arthur Brooks has just come out with his book. What is it called? Living Your Best Life, maybe. And he's talking about happiness all the time and the science of
I haven't read that
happiness.
one, but yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think he co-wrote it with Oprah.
Okay.
Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
You can edit that out if you want. But he claims that he knows these social media influencers. He knows some of them, like, the bodybuilders and the fitness models and all that stuff. He claims that they're mostly all miserable. They sure don't look miserable, at least when you're in that milieu. It looks like they're killing it. They're living their best life, that type of thing. He tells the story of a friend of his who was a fitness influencer who became so paranoid and gripped with depression and despair and despondency that in order to address that, he took all the mirrors out of his house, and for a year he showered in the dark.
Wow.
Just to overcome that, because of the way that when our narrative gets skewed, when it's filled with fundamental lies from an anthropological standpoint, we're toast. You know what I mean? Because then we're feeding upon poison constantly, and that's...
The pressure of the modern self to invent itself is crushingly brutal.
Yeah.
And I think that's what social media has become, and probably has been since its inception. But to say, hey, show us who you are. And I think the confidence for any individual to show us truly who they are publicly is very difficult. That's why we admire the saints, is
Yeah.
that they could be themselves everywhere.
That's exactly right.
And I think social media has said you cannot be yourself everywhere.
Have you ever seen this film Into Great Silence?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so this is you should see this film,
Okay.
and I didn't like it at all, not even a little bit. But that's because
It's an odd recommendation, but keep going.
So it's a film about the Grand Chartreuse, the sort of headquarters of the followers of Saint Bruno. So it's the original Carthusian monastery, and in the middle of the 1990s, a film crew contacted them and wanted to come and film, and they said no. And then, like 20 years later or something, they said now you can come. So they did this film, and it's like almost silent. It's like monks like working with a hoe. And then
For like 5 minutes shot,
for
or-
5
yeah.
minutes, and you're watching this for 5 minutes
Yeah.
and all this other stuff. And so you mentioned the saints. What's interesting about social media is that the authenticity is so
Shallow.
creepy and shallow, because it's either living your best life or people are like, I just have to make a confession. You know what I mean? And they're bawling into the screen. But their life isn't like that. It's mostly not highs and lows. It's mostly super boring.
Yeah.
And people can't handle, they don't want to deal with the hoeing, which is the most of life. You know what I mean? It's the largest part of life is just being faithful and living every day, day to day, the humdrum. And Blaise Pascal said that the most the cause of all of our trouble, all the trouble in the world, is that a man can't sit alone in his room quietly for 20 minutes. And I think that's probably true.
Oh, and it's coming from a man who said, God, I'm going to go into my closet and I'm not going to come out until I hear you, which is, a fascinating story.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for the church as they start to digest all that we've been talking about and things like that? I'll give you a minute just to kind of touch on something that we were talking about with mythic narrative. I see something fascinating happening, and tell me if you see this too. The conversation over the last few years has started to change, where people have said, join the church. And I see the conversation shifting to, and this is, a small summary of it, and we see this at the National Eucharistic Congress where we are, fall in love with Jesus. And it's very different if we start saying, love the bride versus fall in love with the groom. Because if we say love the bride, in some sense, it's mystical, it's beautiful, she's holy and all of those things. I'm not denying all those things. But when we look to Jesus, the bride makes way more sense. And I think as people have started to be more explicit with that, I think you see these pockets of culture within the church change, or the conversations within those pockets change. And I see that when we talk about mythic narrative, it wasn't that at the end of the day we had a really great social club. And I'm not saying people are saying join the church to join a social club, but it's join the church to be with the people who have fallen in love with the Lord. And that has been a subtle shift that I've noticed, but I don't know if that's from your perspective, if you've seen that change. And I see you're part of that change, of course, but any thoughts on that?
Well, I think when we talk about identifying the correct ruling imaginative vision, immersing ourselves more deeply in the Christian imaginative vision, understanding the principles that undergird the modern progressive neo-Gnostic, utopian, revolutionary religion. It's another way of saying what St. Paul says repeatedly, that we should take on the mind of Christ. Falling in love with Jesus is not for the Christian fundamentally an emotional phenomenon, although emotions are not unimportant in that respect. It's being mesmerized by the truth of the Lord. St. John Paul II said that the most beautiful word in the New Testament is truth.
Mm.
And Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And he means everything. His story is every story. He's living the saving work that he came to fulfill in your life and in my life now. And so to take on his mind and to recognize that he wants to move in the world in and through us is very important. So I was knocked off my chair about a week and a half ago. Was the Feast of St. Benedict. And University of Mary is a Benedictine university, and we're really devoted to him. And so I was reading a passage from the Rule of St. Benedict. From the prologue, he has this line where Benedict says, "Run while you have the light of life, lest the darkness of death overtake you." We've taken our motto from that. Lumen Vitae is the motto of the University of Mary, light of life. So we took that from that passage, run while you have the light of life. Of course, that's not just St. Benedict, that's Jesus in the Gospel of John. He says the same thing. But then Benedict goes on and he says this, and it strikes right at the center of what you're saying. He says, from the throng of people to whom the Lord says that, there are some who hear it and say, hello, I'm seeking life. I want life in the full. So God is scouring the earth to see who it is who will respond. In Jesus' public ministry, he's constantly moving from place to place, testing hearts. That's what he's doing. And that's what he does now, too. He moves through the world. I won't force myself on anyone, but what heart is ready to receive me? Who has that openness? Where can I find a welcome? Where don't I have to shake off my sandals? And then, this is amazing, then Benedict says, if you want life, then keep your mouth from evil. Allow peace to dwell in your mind. He says, this is how you should live. And then I will hear your prayer before you think to ask me, and I will say to you, here I am. Now, this is super interesting to me. Benedict's quoting from Isaiah, but when I read it, I was thinking about the call of Samuel. Remember, so Eli says to him, "Go. If you hear the voice again, say, 'Speak, Lord, your servant is listening.'" God searches the world to find those who are ready for his love, who are willing to receive it, who want life to the full. To the person who responds in that way with love, God says, okay, I'll hear your prayer before you even tell me, and then I'll serve you. Here I am to serve you. This is Jesus washing the feet of his disciples the night before he died. It's almost too good to be true. Well, it is. And so I think that this kind of encounter with the Lord, taking on his mind, allowing his testing of us to penetrate into us and to transform us, this then makes our love for the church irresistibly second nature. I mean, it has to happen because it's his bride then that we're talking about, I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's my perspective on it.
No, it does, and I it's almost too good to keep having the conversation. But I'll wrap up with a thought of when we are able to properly see Jesus.
Yeah.
So many other things fall into place in a beautiful way. Our narrative ends up becoming more clear. Our yearning and our understanding and our, the holy drama we find ourselves pursuing, not as a whole, but in our each, unique lives, the understanding of ourselves and the identity that we have been bestowed in from the Father in his, in his image, and through the community that we have, which is the church, we find ourselves, and we find this beautiful life and to the full. So I want to thank you for joining me today. It's always a delight to have a conversation with you. And again, you can find The Religion of the Day from University of Mary Press on Prime Matters. And I just have to say, any young person who's serious about something, I even from Canada, I say, look, North Dakota is, it's like the rest of Canada.
It's a strange land.
Well, it's not that strange, and there's a beautiful thing going on there at the University of Mary. So I recommend all the young people I know that, in our parish to deeply consider going there. So James' daughter's actually going there. So
praise God. Yeah. We need more Canadians. We need more nice people in North Dakota. But I'm just very happy to be with you, Jason. I admire once again the work that you do and the flourishing that you're talking about. I hope for you and for all of your team who works with you on Tilma, for your family as well, and for all of our listeners. That's our hope and prayer, that all of us might win through to and receive the great gift of a full life in Christ, bursting with energy and joy. Because these are exciting times in which to live. We have to weep a little bit, but that's the gospel too. And then we rejoice.
It's like Esther, for such a time as this.
That's right.
Thank you again for joining me. It's been wonderful.
My pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you. You too.